This week I bring you the most excellent and tragical history of Arthur, King of Britain, by none other than William Shakespeare. It's actually my favorite, but you've probably never heard of it. Actually, you've probably never heard of it because it's fake. This isn't by Shakespeare, it's by Arthur Phillips. Look, it says so right there. Sure, he used the same historical sources and the language is recognizably Shakespearean, but that doesn't make it Shakespeare, right? Well, who is Shakespeare in the 21st century? He's kind of more of a what than a who, an idea more than a person, right? Credited with articulating the deepest understanding of humanity, Shakespeare has evolved beyond human, a very god of culture, our creator. Does that sound crazy? Well, I didn't come up with the idea, and neither did Arthur Phillips. It's actually from Harold Bloom's critical tome entitled Shakespeare, the Invention of the Human. That's right, the invention of the human. The tragedy of Arthur simply entertains its possible implications. Like, maybe if we're only the kind of human that Shakespeare imagined us to be, then it's just a matter of picking up some 16th century vocabulary to write like him. For Shakespeare lovers, this idea is very painful. Indeed, much of Arthur Phillips' novel is truly painful in the way that all well-crafted deception is painful. That is, it makes everything about the reality we've come to know seem suspicious. The fact that he's toying with Shakespeare simply raises the stakes. The entire novel is designed to look like the release of a brand new Shakespeare play, just with a ridiculously long introduction written by the protagonist, also named Arthur Phillips. It's even complete with a copy of the Quarto cover page. As with all introductions, Phillips' story colors the way you view the play. So I decided to skip straight to the Faux-Spear and enjoy the ruse in spite of myself before going back to read the lengthy front matter. Arthur Phillips. This is the second novel I've covered on Brave Little Books where the protagonist bears the name of the author. In this case, of course, it's all part of the game. If you throw in enough truths, you see, the lies start to seem real too. As long as the story fits, it feels believable. But deception is a two-way street, and this is as much a book about reading as it is about writing. Only a very careful reader of Shakespeare could craft a remotely convincing fake, and Arthur Phillips is a beautifully careful reader. But more than that, the idea that Shakespeare invented the human is more about a history of readers than about Shakespeare himself. Even when we know we're reading a novel, the idea of a brand new Shakespeare play is tantalizing enough that our own wishful thinking might lead us to forget for a little while that we're actually reading a play by a contemporary American author. In a world of computers where we can Google anything, perform DNA tests, and forensically place and date old manuscripts, it's easy to sympathize somewhat with Arthur Phillips Sr., the supposed Shakespeare forger. We might even share in his disdain for groups like the Rembrandt Research Project, whose job it is to determine the authenticity of paintings proclaimed to be Rembrandt's work. Which means, of course, that they spend a lot of times proving things fake rather than proving them genuine. In a forger's eyes, they spend their time sucking the magic out of perfectly good paintings. I mean, what's really so wrong with transforming a nothing into a something, an anonymous painting into a Rembrandt masterpiece? Phillips Jr., convinced his father's tragedy of Arthur is a fake, protests, "If I didn't write this, it wouldn't sound like something I wrote." But in the end, what's really the difference between Shakespeare and Faux-Spear except that we believe it thus? A playful meditation on the greatest writer in the English language that was the tragedy of Arthur. And believe it or not, this is Brave Little Books.